today.
Don't be so disappointed. Good afternoon. Good to see everybody here. So glad y'all could make it out for us this afternoon. Let me offer an invocation. Dear Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to serve others and to serve you. We thank you for the calling you've given us all to do your will in our lives. And I pray, Lord, that you'd give us the wisdom to do your will as we also seek to do the will of the people we represent today. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. Amen. All right. It's good to see everybody out this afternoon. Preliminarily, I want to make sure the members know in your folders today, you'll see a list of the subcommittees of the Transportation Committee, an updated list, has our new members on it, and changed around some of the memberships, some of the vacancies we had in some positions. And so I need you to pay attention to that today, because our process today will be to hear a brief introduction to a few bills from the sponsors and some Senate bills, and then we'll be assigning those bills to subcommittee. So if you want to pay attention to which subcommittees you're on, so you can get with the chairman and y'all can get your bills heard in those subcommittees. All right. So the bills that I expect us to hear about today are Senate Bill 366, Senate Bill 383, and Senate Bill 307. And I'm going to ask Senator Ginn if he'll come around. He asked me to pull him first because he had an. And I don't see Senator Gooch here yet, so nobody to bump you out of place just yet. So why don't you go ahead and get started. Just tell us a little bit about your Senate Bill 383.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you read through the bill, I don't want anybody in here to think it's deja vu all over again, but we passed a very similar measure a few years ago dealing with permitted signs on our state highways. A lot of people call them billboards. Up my way said the we've got businesses. You ride through your district and look, and it may be anything from a automobile dealership to a farm equipment dealer to a restaurant to a hotel, but there'll be a lot of things where they have an on-premise sign. Said that this bill will allow them to have that better visibility from the highway. I know for me, when I travel in other states and I'm not familiar with the area, it helps me to see, okay, hey, I'm looking for a grocery store to stop at, or I'm looking for a type of business, and, to have that visibility, from the roadway. Now, Mr. Chairman, on the legislation, it's pretty much, when you look, what we did was we mirrored the legislation we passed I believe it was 3 years ago, and that legislation, the reason why I wanted to try to keep it as clean as I could, because that legislation has passed court challenges. It's one of those things that to me, many of y'all know I spent 20 years managing local governments, and I'm very respectful of local control. So what I want to try to also do in this, and I spell it out towards the end of the bill, said if you'll look on line 171 and on, what we want to try to do is make sure that this bill respects the local sign ordinances and zoning, said and what's going on in each community and their community standards, said based on, they can put, obviously many of you that are attorneys know that you can't regulate the language they put on the sign, but you can tell them how big it's going to be, where they're going to place it, and all those things that you do on the local side of things. So when I look at what we want to try to do is and where I see most of this going is as you maybe going up and down the interstate, you look at a business and they've already got a sign on their business. Well, it may be blocked by trees. This gives them a way to open that up, like Mayfield Dairy in my case. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to go through the bill line by line, bore you to death with all the details, but
No, please don't.
I didn't think you wanted to hear that.
No, that's really not necessary today. What we really just wanted, and all of this is new for us because you've got a new chairman this year in this committee. But what I really want to do today is just kind of get a broad overview and make sure that we have a good enough understanding to then assign it to the right subcommittee. That said, I will recognize a member if they have a question, understanding we're not going to get down into the deep nuts and bolts of this bill today, but is that Chairman McCall? I think, what are you, 27?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this may be more so for DOT than it is for St. Again. It's my understanding that there's something called a special encroachment permit that is available.
There are encroachment permits. I don't have the details on my head.
If I'm worried about which subcommittee this thing's going to, which I think I know.
I can tell you right now it's going to the Subcommittee on Interstate Highway and Beautification.
That's what I was worried about.
Unless there's an objection from the chairman of that subcommittee.
Anyway, if you could come up with that kind of answer to that, I would appreciate it before we get into this thing.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Deffenbaugh, did you have a question?
I do.
Hold on one second. Mr. Ginn.
Mr. Chairman, I might add, I've been trying to get Mayfield Dairies, the visibility problem resolved for several years. Said short of them doing something that would be illegal or the department doing something that would not be approved, it hasn't been able to be done. So,
sure.
It's very, very difficult.
I understand. Mr. Deffenbaugh, do you have a question?
I do.
Okay.
Senator, from what I gathered you saying, that there's no difference on variation on the sign itself, height-wise, size-wise?
Those would be determined by the local ordinance.
But this covers none of that.
That's correct. When they have a sign, and one of the things that what we're trying to do is to have a target view area for their sign, whether that be the side of the building. For me, most of the individuals that you see that are going to do this, they are going to be somebody that has a larger sign, because it's quite expensive, and we don't want to do it for free. Now, the money that gets raised for them going through the permitting process on this. Matter of fact, I think of the first year that we passed the sign ordinance 3 years ago, I want to say it generated $2.3 million for highway beautification funds, and those are used as co-op money with local governments and chambers to do plantings that you see all over the interstates, and that fund unfortunately is down to about $100,000 right now. So I'm not wanting to do anything to give the store away, but I do want to make sure that the DOT has an opportunity to work with businesses to improve business here in Georgia.
Is that also not going to include the interstates?
It would be any state route, so it would be the interstates, the state highways. Said typically you'll probably see this more on 4-lane roads than you would on 2-lane roads.
But it's all maintenance, not new.
I'm sorry.
Let me jump in here just a second. I want to hold up Chairman McCall as an excellent example of the kind of questions we're looking for today. Questions that go to what you're going to need the senator to present in the subcommittee.
Okay.
Questions that go to what you might want other members of the public to bring to that subcommittee, rather than getting into the specifics of the bill today. Let's so he's kind of got a flavor for what you're asking about,
Yeah.
and he can flesh that out in subcommittee. With that comment, Representative Waits, did you have a question?
No, sir. I was interested in serving on that committee.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. So any other questions? I see no other questions for Senator Ginn. We are going to assign your bill, Senator Ginn, to the Interstate Highway and Beautification Subcommittee, so you can get with Chairman McCall about scheduling and arrangements for your witnesses and so forth.
Thank you very much, Chairman Cooper.
Thank you very much. All right. Senator Gooch, I'm trying to accommodate everybody's schedules. Do you have a meeting you need to get to very shortly, or do you have a little time?
I'll defer.
Well, since you're so flexible, I'm going to ask Senator Beach to come up.
And I'll be brief.
Well, and as you're coming, let me tell you this. I just realized we have another bill for you before the committee, and again, what we want to do is make this process start moving on all these bills. So we've also got Senate Bill 346.
Okay.
Are you comfortable talking about both of those
Yes,
bills?
yes.
Okay, let's start with 307.
Okay. Basically, 307 it deals with bus shelters at a transit facility, and right now you can put posters. All this does, really the crux of the bill is on lines 20 and 21. Multiple media display means a device by which a message, image, or a text is capable of electronic alteration by movement or rotation of panels or slats. It still has to follow all the same billboard regulations as far as a 10-second image, controlled brightness, and no obscene material on the signage. So that's all this bill does.
Any questions about Senate Bill 307? All right, let's hear about Senate Bill 346.
346, last year, and I want to thank this Transportation Committee for passing HB 170. It gives us $1 billion of our own money. And all I'm doing with this, it's called the Environmental Policy Act. They still have to do all the requirements of the Clean Water Act, the Erosion Sedimentation Act, Wildfire Act. There's 6 different tests they have to go through. But what happens now, Mr. Chairman, is when those tests are done on statewide projects, and this is, by the way, no federal money is involved in this. This is just statewide money. Then what happens is after they do those the Clean Water Act and so on, then what they have to do is they hire a consulting group to then put those reports together, dot the I's, cross the T's, and it usually takes them 45 to 60 days to do that. Then they send it to EPD, and it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to then get stamped and approved, and then it gets sent back to the department. Then they can put a shovel in the ground. All this is doing, they're still going to do the 6 tests, but they don't have to do the paperwork. So they still have to do the process, but they don't have to do the paperwork. And it'll expedite, it'll save on consulting fees, number one, but the real money to be saved is by expediting these projects. And as soon as we know that it doesn't affect the Clean Water Act and the erosion sediment and the 6 different things, and I don't have that with me, but there's 6 different categories, then we can put a shovel in the dirt and we can get some of that state money putting orange barrels out and building roads. So that's why I'm doing this. I used to serve on the GDOT board along with Senator Gooch, and every time we would have a problem with a project in our district, when you peeled the onion back, it was the environmental paperwork. It wasn't the environmental, it was the paperwork sitting on somebody's desk and being shuffled around. We are just cutting out the paperwork so we can get roads built and get taxpayers' money well spent and get our citizens moving and out of congestion. So that's all this bill does.
All right, thank you, Senator. Anybody have any questions for the Senator about either bill? All right, let me say this before we move on. when you were making your presentation, you made a reference to House Bill 170, and I think this is a good time as any to say this, that any amendments to these bills that seeks to invade what this General Assembly passed by House Bill 170 last year will be ruled as ingermane, not germane to the bill. I'm just going to tell you that right now. So I hope nobody had that plan in mind. I don't think anybody did, but it's not going to happen.
And I want to rest
And I'm
assured
not speaking to you.
That was not me at all.
Yeah.
The reason I referenced House Bill 170, one of the reasons I voted for it was to wean ourselves off the federal dollar and take control of our own destiny, if you will, and have our own $1 billion so we could spend it faster without all the NEPA studies and this, the bureaucracy of taking a federal dollar. So that's all I was referencing. So now I want to just take it a step further and help the GDOT, and GDOT's for this, help them cut out some paperwork so they can build roads 6 to 8 months quicker.
I honestly, Mr. Senator, I wasn't saying that for your benefit,
all right.
but really for the people who are just a few feet behind you.
Okay.
So they'll understand as well.
Right.
We're not delving into House Bill 170 revisions this year. We have a very good policy, which is we're going to wait until we have a year's worth of data
Right.
to figure out if we need to make changes. And I know you agree with that. So
100%.
you just happen to be the guy that said the magic words. So.
Well, I probably shouldn't have said that, but I was just trying to make a point. That's why I voted for it, was to wean ourselves off the federal dollars.
Okay, before you go, is it Representative Williams? Did you?
Yes.
Thank you, sir, for bringing this bill. But let me ask, I just wanted for clarification. I was just thinking about a baby. We ain't doing no weaning. We giving this baby some more milk. Ain't nobody gonna send no federal dollar. You make it sound like we're going to wean, but the last I heard, we're gonna keep all the federal money we can get, and this is just a supplemental diet.
No, right. I still want the federal money. Don't get me
Okay,
wrong.
well, no, but when you said wean, sounded like we were getting ready to get rid of, but that's not the purpose.
I still want to get our federal dollars.
All right.
I just want to use our state dollars for capital projects so we can get projects done faster.
Of course, not wean.
Okay.
Enhance.
I agree.
Thank you,
Enhance.
sir.
All right.
We
Thank you.
want that baby to grow faster.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Senator, I'm going to assign both these bills just for your convenience and the convenience of the subcommittee. I'm going to assign them both to the Highway Regulations Subcommittee. And the new chairman for that subcommittee is Sam Watson. And so get with Mr. Watson.
And ask for a hearing? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. All right. Senator Gooch. Come on around, sir. And you've got Senate Bill 366, is that correct? All right. And you've told me that this is an excellent bill, so I'm sure it is.
Is that a motion? Thank you.
I will not entertain a motion to table right now.
Oh, no. Good, thank you. All right, let me get started. It's a one-pager. It's pretty simple to read, but you may be getting some calls or some comments on this bill. You just heard from Senator Beach. He and I have served on the DOT board together. The longer you stay over there, the more you learn about how the process works. Over the years, as you all know, we've worked hard here at the General Assembly to create a more efficiency government. A more efficient government means different things to different people. But if you look at the chart that you've seen many times in this committee that's been handed out by the DOT employees behind me, you'll see the number of employees that are at GDOT. So back in 1972, there were 9,110 people working for the department. Today, that number is below 4,000. In fact, it's 3,986. Now, you may ask yourself, how in the world can a department grow in the opposite direction so rapidly over the last 20 or 30 or 40 years? And it's because of outsourcing. We've gone from roughly 9,000 employees to under 4,000 employees, but we continue to maintain more roads, more bridges, and the population of Georgia has doubled or tripled in that time frame. We're at 10 million people in Georgia. We maintain literally tens of thousands of roads in our state with limited resources. Last year's House Bill 170 was a big success for us, and it's going to generate huge revenue streams for GDOT moving forward. And along with the federal monies that we now know we're going to get for the next 5 years, GDOT is in a mode of getting projects out the door. They're putting contracts out as we speak. They're sending out RFPs daily. And a lot of that work has to start with engineering services or surveying services or appraisal services, other professional services. Under today's law, the procurement for those professional services is done through a process called QBS. QBS is an acronym for Qualifications-Based Selection. And how that works, not to get too far into the details or the weeds today, but the chief engineer appoints a committee of GDOT employees that are qualified in that particular area, whatever that project may be, whether it's to design a new bridge or design a new road or an expansion or what have you. The GDOT's chief engineer picks people that are qualified that knows that topic. So those people are called subject matter experts, SMEs. So the SMEs sit down after a proposal is sent out for qualifications-based selection. The proposals would be submitted by engineers or whatever the professional services are that are needed. The SMEs at GDOT would sit down and look at each one of the proposals. They score the proposals based on qualifications, and they rank the proposals 1 through 10 or 1 through 5, whatever the number is, on least qualified versus most qualified. So let's say, for example, a number 1 would be the most qualified proposal. Out of all the companies that submit a proposal, let's say company A is the most qualified company. Once that list is put in sequential order, numerical order, they will go and sit down with that company, that first most qualified company, and they will negotiate a fee for those professional services. They're not doing it on a bid basis. They're doing it strictly on an open negotiations between the GDOT employees and the person representing the company that submitted the proposal. SB 366 simply adds one layer to that. It allows GDOT as an option, not a mandate, it's a may. The DOT commissioner or the employees at GDOT may employ this method that would allow, once the selection process is shortlisted to the 3 to 5 most qualified firms, they would then submit a best price bid for that work. And then the DOT would select the lowest bidder for that job. And that's simply what the bill does. Let me give you a couple numbers, then I'll close. In fiscal year 13, the DOT had 434 contracts under the QBS model that equated to $157 million worth of work. In fiscal year 14, that number increased to 418 contracts for $175 million. Fiscal year 15, there were 399 contracts for roughly $177 million. Because of what we did last year with House Bill 170, we have added $1 billion of extra revenue into the DOT budget. Obviously, more projects are going to get built. That means more contracts are going to be let for contractors and for professional services. The projected cost this year for fiscal year 16 is $303 million for those professional services. So we're basically doubling the number of professional services that we're going to be hiring at DOT under the QBS system. This bill will allow DOT to simply use it as an option to ask for a best price proposal once the short list is considered. So with that, I'll stop and see if you have any questions of me.
Any questions for Majority Whip? Representative Clark.
Senator, is this done in other states?
There are a few states that do it, but not many.
Okay.
And I will say this, under the federal code, it will not be allowed for federal projects. It will only be allowed for state-funded projects.
Great. Thank you very much.
Chairman McCall.
Is there a project size related to this or some kind of trigger that would
Yes, sir, under
pull this in?
under current law, and I believe Josh may have that number at the top of his head. I have it here in my notes. I think it's $75 million or $75,000. If the cost of those professional services exceeds $75,000, that would be the trigger. $75,000 if the professional fees are in excess of that. Yes.
Representative Taylor.
That's under current code.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this apply to just state projects or local projects? We actually had one where somebody got the contract and they were not really qualified to do it. It would fix a problem like that.
Local governments already use this method. They're not
Okay.
restricted from it like state government is.
Okay.
But let me just remind you, if a company, whether it's an engineering firm or an appraiser or a surveyor, whomever, does a lousy job, they won't be shortlisted again. The DOT staff will make sure that that company never works again. Plus, they're bonded for their work, and they have E&O insurance. There's other levels of security there for that work. Now, that's not to say there's not going to be a mistake done. There's not going to be change orders. That's something that happens in their line of work all the time. So, but I think that can be protected as much
Thank
as
you.
possible.
Representative Williams?
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to get in the weeds like you said. We'll save this for subcommittee, but would you just, once again, just tell me, what is this going to do to improve the process? How much do you anticipate it improving it? And just why is this necessary? Just in a few words, I want to just know why do we need this?
Well, let me start with the big picture. A lot of us went out on a major limb last year when we voted for what was considered a $1 billion tax increase. We all know that it wasn't a $1 billion tax increase, but it was a $1 billion increase of revenues to the DOT. We all went home and we had to justify why we voted yes for that. Some of you may have voted against that bill, but I voted for it. I carried it in the Senate. But I also went home and I told the people back home that I didn't think it was a waste of money, that I thought that the DOT was doing a good job, and I thought they were doing what needed to be done to protect the roads in Georgia and the bridges in Georgia. But at the same time, I said, is there waste in government? Yes, I think there's still waste in government. And I think this is one measure that we can show the people of Georgia that we're going to put into place to try to squeeze as much efficiency as we can in the process of procuring services for the state contracts. So the highway contractors are already using low bid methods. Other contractors in Georgia are doing it. I think this is an area that needs a little attention. It's an option at this point. It's not a must. It's a may. You still have to shortlist the firms. You still pick the most qualified people to bid, and then you allow them to submit their price for the work.
All right. No other questions for the senator. Senate Bill 366 is going to be assigned to the State Highways Subcommittee, which is Chairman Tommy Benton is the chairman of that subcommittee, right over here to your left. And so if you'll get with him about scheduling a hearing, that'd be great. All right. Couple of housekeeping matters before we finish up. One is I have, of course, we created the special subcommittee on transit policy early on in this session. And as we've gone through the session, we've had a few transit-related measures that have needed to be addressed. And so what I've done, rather than starting to assign bills to that subcommittee, which is what I thought I might do originally, instead what I've done is I have I've made a change to the Railway and Transit subcommittee of this committee. I've named Chairman Harrell as the chairman of that subcommittee, and Ms. Pat Gardner is the vice chairman of that subcommittee. And all the members who were on that special subcommittee are now on the Railway and Transit subcommittee of this larger committee. So I tell you all that to tell you what I'm going to do next, which is I'm assigning, or I guess technically recommitting, House Resolution 830 and House Bill 1032 to the Railway and Transit subcommittee. And I'll leave it to the chairman to schedule a hearing on that at his leisure. And also, is there anybody here on Senate Bill 420, Senator Tippin's bill? Has Senator Tippins talked to any members of this committee about his bill? Anybody on this committee heard from Senator Tippins? I have not heard from Senator Tippins either. And I know Senator Tippins would never want a bill to sit in committee and just wait and languish. I'm sure he would never do that in his committee to any bills. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and sign Senate Bill 420 to the Railway and Transit Subcommittee, so y'all can address that bill also at your convenience. And I wouldn't ask you to reach out to Senator Tippins. If he wants a hearing, he can reach out to you. So, all right. Any questions from members of the committee? Any other issues to address? We are adjourned.